The morning sun painted the mountains of Afghanistan in shades of gold and orange. Master Sergeant Sarah Chen adjusted her rifle scope for the 100th time, her breath creating small clouds in the thin mountain air. The Taliban fighters had been moving through the valley below for 3 days, and her team had been tracking them from their hidden position on the rocky ridge. Sarah had been a sniper for 12 years. She had served in Iraq, Syria, and now, Afghanistan. Her record for the longest confirmed kill was 2,100 meters, a shot that had earned her respect from every soldier in her unit. But today, something was different. The enemy was much farther away than she had ever attempted to shoot before. Her spotter, Corporal Mike Rodriguez, lowered his binoculars and shook his head. "Sarge, they're way out there. I'm reading 3,560 meters on the rangefinder. That's over 2 miles. Sarah peered through her scope at the distant figures moving across the valley floor. They looked like tiny ants from this distance. She could barely make out their shapes, even with her powerful optics. The wind was unpredictable at this elevation, swirling between the peaks in ways that could throw off even the most experienced marksman. "Command, this is Overwatch 7. Sarah spoke into her radio. "I have eyes on multiple targets in the valley. Range is 3,560 meters. Requesting permission to engage." The radio crackled to life. "Overwatch 7. This is command. Did you say 3,560 meters? Confirmed, command. 3,560 meters." A long pause followed. Sarah could almost hear the officers at headquarters discussing her request. She knew what they were thinking. The longest confirmed sniper kill in military history was 3,540 meters. Made by a Canadian sniper in Iraq. What she was proposing was beyond the limits of what most people considered possible. Finally, the voice came back through the radio. "Overwatch 7. That distance is beyond effective range for your weapon system. The bullet drop alone would be over 400 inches. We cannot authorize that shot." Sarah felt her jaw tighten. She had spent hours studying the ballistics tables for her rifle. She knew the challenges better than anyone. The 338 Lapua Magnum bullet would take over 4 seconds to reach the target. In that time, the wind could push it several feet off course. The bullet would drop so much that she would have to aim far above her target, essentially shooting blind. "Command, I understand the difficulties," Sarah replied. "But these targets are high-value individuals. Intelligence suggests they are planning an attack on the village below. I may not get another opportunity. Negative, Overwatch 7. The shot is impossible at that range. Continue observation and report any movement." Sarah set down her radio and looked at Rodriguez. He had been her spotter for 3 years, and they had developed an almost telepathic understanding of each other's thoughts. "Sarge, maybe command is right," he said quietly. "That's a hell of a long shot. I've never seen anyone attempt anything close to that distance." Sarah returned to her scope, studying the targets below. Through her powerful optics, she could see 5 men moving along a narrow path. One of them was carrying what appeared to be a radio antenna, suggesting he might be a communications officer. Another was pointing toward the village, clearly giving orders to the others. She had grown up hunting with her father in the mountains of Colorado. He had taught her that shooting was as much about instinct as it was about mathematics. Sometimes, he had told her, you have to trust your gut and take the shot that others say can't be made. The wind had died down slightly, and Sarah noticed that the air temperature was dropping as clouds moved across the sun. These were the kinds of conditions that could actually help with a long-range shot. Cooler air was denser, which meant less bullet drop. The reduced wind would minimize drift. She began running calculations in her head, adjusting for altitude, temperature, humidity, and wind speed. The math was complex, but she had done these calculations thousands of times in training and combat. Every variable mattered at this distance. A 1-degree difference in temperature could move the bullet several inches. A slight change in wind direction could miss the target completely. Rodriguez watched his sergeant work through the problem. He had seen her make impossible shots before, but never at anything approaching this distance. He trusted her skills more than anyone. But even he had doubts about what she was considering. "What are you thinking, Sarge?" he asked. Sarah continued to peer through her scope, watching the patterns of the wind in the valley below. Dust devils swirled in predictable patterns, giving her clues about air movement at different altitudes. The targets had stopped moving and appeared to be setting up some kind of equipment. "I'm thinking that command might be wrong," she said. "I'm thinking that sometimes you have to attempt the impossible to save lives." She adjusted her scope's elevation dial, cranking it to its maximum setting and then calculating how much additional holdover she would need. The bullet would have to arc high into the sky, following a trajectory that would take it nearly 300 feet above the target before gravity brought it back down. "Rodriguez, I need you to give me the most accurate wind reading you can. Check every level from here to the target. Look for patterns, changes in direction, anything that might affect the bullet's flight path." Her spotter raised his binoculars and began a systematic study of the entire valley. He watched for dust clouds, swaying vegetation, and the movement of birds that might indicate wind currents. It was detailed work that required years of experience to interpret correctly. "Wind is variable," he reported. "Light and variable near the target, maybe 3 to 5 miles per hour from the northwest. Stronger winds at mid-range, maybe 8 to 10 miles per hour, same direction. I'm seeing some thermal activity that might cause vertical wind currents." Sarah processed this information, adding it to her mental calculations. She had one advantage that the officers at headquarters didn't fully understand. Her rifle was equipped with the most advanced scope available, and she had spent months learning its capabilities. More importantly, she had an intuitive understanding of ballistics that came from years of experience. The targets below had begun moving again, heading toward a position where they would have a clear view of the village. Sarah realized that if they were planning an attack, she might be the only person in position to stop them. The nearest friendly forces were hours away. She made her decision. Even if command wouldn't authorize the shot, she had a responsibility to protect the innocent people below. Sometimes being a soldier meant making difficult choices that others couldn't or wouldn't make. "Rodriguez, spot for me. If I'm going to attempt this, I need your eyes on the target." Her spotter looked at her with surprise. "Sarge, you're going against direct orders. Sometimes protecting people means taking risks that others think are impossible," Sarah replied. "If I'm wrong, the worst that happens is I miss and waste a bullet. If I'm right, we might save a lot of lives." Rodriguez nodded slowly. He had learned to trust Sarah's judgment, and he could see the determination in her eyes. If she believed the shot was possible, he would do everything he could to help her make it. Sarah settled into her shooting position, adjusting her body to achieve perfect stability. At this distance, even the smallest movement could throw off her aim by several feet. She controlled her breathing, slowing her heart rate, and finding the natural rhythm that would allow her to fire between heartbeats. Through her scope, the targets looked impossibly small. She could barely distinguish them from the rocks and shadows around them. The crosshairs seemed to dance in the thin air, moved by her pulse and the slight tremor that came with the adrenaline of attempting something that had never been done before. She began her final preparations, checking her rifle's zero one more time and making tiny adjustments to her position. The shot would require perfect technique and a little bit of luck. The bullet would be in the air for over 4 seconds, during which time anything could happen. "Range confirmed at 3,560 meters, Rodriguez whispered. "Wind is steady at 5 miles per hour from the northwest. Target is stationary." Sarah took a deep breath and placed her finger on the trigger. She had made the calculations, studied the conditions, and prepared as thoroughly as possible. Now it came down to execution and faith in her abilities. The moment stretched out as she found her natural point of aim, high above the distant target. In her mind, she could see the bullet's path, arcing through the thin mountain air like a perfectly thrown ball. Every factor had been considered, every variable accounted for. But as her finger tightened on the trigger, a new thought entered her mind. The doubt crept in just as she was about to fire, causing her to hesitate at the critical moment. Sarah released the pressure on her trigger and took another deep breath. The doubt had broken her concentration, and she knew that firing with uncertainty would guarantee a miss. She needed to clear her mind and trust her training. "Second thoughts, Sarge?" Rodriguez asked quietly. "Just making sure I have everything right," Sarah replied. At this distance, there's no room for error. She began her preparation ritual again. The same routine she had followed for thousands of shots over the years. First, she checked her rifle's position, making sure it was perfectly stable on its bipod. Then she verified her scope settings, confirming that all her calculations were correctly input into the weapon system. The targets below had moved slightly, but they were still within her field of view. Through her scope, she could see that one of them was now looking through binoculars toward the village. Her suspicions about their intentions seemed to be confirmed. "Rodriguez, give me one more wind reading. I need to be absolutely certain." Her spotter conducted another careful observation of the valley conditions. "Wind has actually improved, Sarge. It's dropped to maybe 3 miles per hour, almost directly from the north. Temperature is steady, humidity unchanged. These were better conditions than she had hoped for. The reduced wind would minimize the bullet's drift, and the stable temperature meant her calculations would remain accurate." Sarah felt her confidence returning. She had always been different from other snipers, where many relied heavily on technology and mathematical formulas. Sarah combined science with intuition. Her father had called it reading the shot, the ability to sense when all the conditions were aligned perfectly. "I can feel it, Rodriguez," she said. "This is the right moment." She settled back into her shooting position, her body finding the natural alignment that had been developed through years of practice. Her left hand gripped the rifle's stock with just enough pressure to maintain control without creating tension. Her right hand held the pistol grip lightly, finger resting alongside the trigger guard. The breathing came naturally now, deep and controlled. Sarah had learned early in her career that oxygen was critical for steady shooting. Too little oxygen caused tremors, while too much created lightheadedness. She found the perfect balance, her body relaxing into the shot. Through her scope, the target area came into sharp focus. The 5 men had clustered together near a large boulder, apparently studying something on the ground. Sarah chose the tallest figure, the one who appeared to be giving orders to the others. She made her final scope adjustment, adding the additional elevation needed for the extreme distance. The crosshairs now pointed far above her intended target, so high that she could no longer see him through her optics. She was essentially aiming at empty sky, trusting her calculations to bring the bullet down to earth at exactly the right point. "Final check," she whispered to Rodriguez. "Range 3,560 meters. Wind 3 miles per hour from the north. Target stationary." "Confirmed," her spotter replied. Sarah's world narrowed to the small circle of her scope. Everything else faded away, the cold mountain air, the radio chatter from other units, even her own heartbeat. She existed only in the space between her rifle and the distant target. Her finger found the trigger, applying just enough pressure to take up the slack. The weapon's trigger had been carefully adjusted to break at exactly 3.5 pounds of pressure. Too light, and accidental discharges could occur. Too heavy, and accuracy suffered. She felt her pulse slow as her body entered the zone that all elite marksmen recognize. Time seemed to stretch, and her awareness became hyperacute. She could feel the slight vibration of her heartbeat through the rifle stock, and timed her shot to fall between beats. The moment arrived with perfect clarity. Wind steady, breathing controlled, body position optimal, calculations complete. Sarah applied the final ounce of pressure to the trigger. The rifle fired with a sharp crack that echoed across the mountains. The 338 Lapua Magnum bullet left the barrel at 2,960 feet per second, beginning its long journey through the thin Afghan air. Sarah felt the familiar recoil push against her shoulder, but she maintained her position to watch for impact. "Shot away," Rodriguez called out, tracking the bullet's path through his spotting scope. Sarah knew it would take over 4 seconds for the bullet to reach its target. At this distance, she couldn't see the projectile in flight. She could only wait and trust that her calculations had been correct. 1 second passed. The bullet was climbing toward its maximum height, fighting against gravity while maintaining its forward momentum. At this point, it was traveling at nearly 2,500 feet per second, still moving faster than the speed of sound. 2 seconds. The bullet reached its apex, nearly 300 feet above the target area. It had traveled almost half the distance to target, and gravity was beginning to curve its path downward more dramatically. 3 seconds. The projectile was now descending rapidly. Its velocity decreased to about 1,800 feet per second, but still carrying tremendous energy. Small variations in air density and wind were affecting its path, but the heavy bullet was fighting through the turbulence. 4 seconds felt like an eternity. Sarah held her breath, watching through her scope for any sign of impact. The targets were still clustered near the boulder, unaware that death was approaching from over 2 miles away. "I don't see impact yet," Rodriguez reported, scanning the target area with his powerful optics. Sarah's heart began to sink. Had she missed? At this distance, even a perfect shot could be affected by variables she hadn't accounted for. Maybe command had been right after all. Then Rodriguez's voice cut through her doubt. "Wait. I see dust kick up near the target area. Something definitely impacted." Sarah adjusted her scope to maximum magnification, trying to see what had happened. The image was hazy at this extreme distance, but she could make out movement among the targets. "I think, yes. I see one man down." Rodriguez's excitement was clear in his voice. "The others are scattering." "You got him, Sarge." Sarah couldn't believe what she was hearing. She had actually hit a target at 3,560 meters, a distance that experts had said was impossible with her weapon system. The mathematics had worked, the conditions had cooperated, and her instincts had been correct. But even as she felt a rush of satisfaction, Sarah remained professional. She quickly worked the rifle's bolt to chamber another round, ready for a follow-up shot if needed. "Are you sure it was a hit?" she asked Rodriguez. "I need confirmation before I report this." Her spotter continued to observe the target area through his scope. "Definite hit, Sarge. I can see the target is down and not moving. The others have taken cover behind the rocks. They're clearly responding to sniper fire." The radio crackled to life. "Overwatch 7. This is command. We heard rifle fire from your position. Report your status." Sarah hesitated for a moment before responding. She had fired against direct orders, technically violating military protocol, but the shot had been successful, and potentially dangerous targets had been neutralized. "Command, this is Overwatch 7. I engaged targets in the valley at range 3,560 meters. One confirmed hit." The silence that followed stretched for nearly 30 seconds. Finally, the voice came back, filled with disbelief. "Overwatch 7. Did you say you engaged at 3,560 meters? Please confirm." "Confirmed, command. Range was 3,560 meters. Shot was successful." Another long pause. Sarah could imagine the reaction at headquarters. She had just accomplished something that had been declared impossible less than an hour earlier. "Overwatch 7. Maintain observation of the area. We're dispatching a team to confirm your target. Do not engage further. Without authorization." "Grood." "Roger, command. Continuing observation." Rodriguez looked at his sergeant with amazement. "Sarge, you just made military history. That's the longest confirmed sniper shot ever recorded." Sarah remained focused on her scope, watching for any further movement in the target area. The remaining 4 men had disappeared behind cover, but she could occasionally see movement as they tried to determine where the shot had come from. "It's not about records, Rodriguez," she said quietly. "It's about protecting people and completing the mission." But privately, Sarah felt a deep satisfaction. She had trusted her skills and instincts when everyone else said success was impossible. The shot had required perfect conditions, precise calculations, and flawless execution. Most importantly, it had potentially saved lives in the village below. As she continued to monitor the target area, Sarah began to think about what would happen next. Word of the shot would spread quickly through military channels. Ballistics experts would want to analyze every aspect of the engagement. Her rifle and scope would be examined to verify their capabilities. "Movement in the target area," Rodriguez reported. "Looks like the remaining targets are withdrawing toward the north. They're staying low and moving fast." Sarah tracked their movement through her scope. The men were clearly shaken by the long-range attack and were retreating from their planned position. Whether they had been planning an attack on the village or not, they were no longer a threat to the civilians below. "Good," she said. But Sarah knew that hitting the target was only the beginning of the story. Now she would have to face questions about why she had fired against direct orders. She would need to justify her decision to attempt an impossible shot. 2 hours after the shot, Sarah heard the distinctive sound of helicopters approaching their position. The confirmation team was arriving faster than she had expected. Through her scope, she could see soldiers rappelling into the valley below, moving carefully toward the target area where her bullet had found its mark. "Overwatch 7, this is Ground Team Alpha," came the voice through her radio. "We're approaching your target area. Maintain observation and guide us to the exact location." Sarah adjusted her scope to track the ground team's movement. "Ground Team Alpha, target is approximately 200 meters northeast of your current position, near the large boulder formation." She watched as the soldiers spread out in a tactical formation, moving with the caution that came from years of combat experience. Even though the remaining enemies had withdrawn, they knew that approaching a sniper's target area was always dangerous. Rodriguez continued to scan the surrounding area with his binoculars, watching for any signs of the 4 men who had fled after Sarah's shot. "No movement in the withdrawal direction, Sarge. I think they're long gone. Ground Team Alpha, be advised that 4 targets withdrew to the north approximately 1 hour ago," Sarah radioed. "Area appears clear, but maintain security." The lead soldier on the ground team acknowledged her report and continued the careful approach to the target site. Sarah felt her heart rate increase as they got closer. Everything depended on what they found there. If her shot had missed, or if the target had only been wounded, her claim of an impossible shot would be questioned. "Contact," came the call from the ground team. "We have 1 enemy Kia at this location. Appears to be a clean hit to the torso." Sarah felt a mixture of relief and professional satisfaction. The shot had been successful, but she took no pleasure in taking a life. It was simply part of her job as a soldier, protecting innocent people from those who would do them harm. "Can you confirm the range from the sniper position?" the ground team leader asked. Rodriguez was already working with his laser rangefinder, getting multiple readings to ensure accuracy. "Range confirmed at 3,562 meters, he reported. Previous estimate was within 2 meters. The number sent a chill through Sarah. She had just executed a shot at a range that exceeded the previous world record by over 20 meters. It was an achievement that would be studied by ballistics experts and military snipers for years to come. Overwatch 7. This is Ground Team Alpha. Target is confirmed neutralized by sniper fire. Range appears to be approximately 3,560 meters. We're documenting the scene and will provide a full report." Sarah's radio crackled again with a transmission from headquarters. "Overwatch 7. This is Colonel Martinez. I need you and your spotter to return to base immediately for debriefing. A helicopter is en route to your location." The tone in the colonel's voice was hard to read. It could have been amazement, anger, or simple disbelief. Sarah suspected she was about to face some difficult questions about her decision to fire against orders. 20 minutes later, a UH-60 Black Hawk helicopter settled onto a flat area near their position. Sarah and Rodriguez quickly packed their equipment and moved to the aircraft. As they lifted off, Sarah looked down at the valley where she had made military history. The flight back to base gave her time to think about what had happened. She had always pushed the boundaries of what was considered possible in long-range shooting. Her instructors at sniper school had recognized her unusual talent for reading wind and atmospheric conditions. But even they would have been amazed by what she had accomplished today. "You nervous about the debriefing?" Rodriguez asked over the helicopter's intercom. "A little," Sarah admitted. "I did fire against direct orders. That's not something the Army takes lightly, even when the shot is successful. But you were right, Sarge. That target needed to be neutralized, and you were the only one in position to do it." Sarah appreciated her spotter's loyalty, but she knew that military discipline required following orders, even when soldiers disagreed with them. She would have to make a strong case that her decision had been justified by the circumstances. When they arrived at the base, Sarah was immediately escorted to a conference room where several senior officers were waiting. Colonel Martinez sat at the head of the table, flanked by the base's senior sniper instructor and a major from military intelligence. "Master Sergeant Chen, please take a seat," Colonel Martinez said. His expression was neutral, giving no hint of what was coming. Sarah sat down and waited for the questions to begin. She had been through many debriefings over the years, but none quite like this one. "Let's start with the basic facts," the colonel began. "You fired a shot at a range of approximately 3,560 meters after being specifically told by command that such a shot was not authorized. Is this correct?" "Troop." "Yes, sir," Sarah replied. "Can you explain why you chose to disobey a direct order?" Sarah had prepared for this question during the helicopter flight. "Sir, I believed that the targets posed an immediate threat to civilian lives in the village below. Intelligence reports suggested they were planning an attack, and I was the only friendly asset in position to intervene. I made a tactical decision that the potential to save lives justified the risk of attempting the shot." The intelligence major leaned forward. "Sergeant Chen, I should inform you that we've since learned that your assessment was correct. The individual you neutralized was a known Taliban commander responsible for planning attacks on civilian targets. The equipment they were carrying included detailed maps of the village and what appeared to be timing devices." Sarah felt a wave of relief. Her instincts about the threat had been accurate, but she remained focused on answering the colonel's questions. "The shot you made has been confirmed by multiple sources as the longest successful sniper engagement in military history," Colonel Martinez continued. "Can you walk us through how you made the calculations for such an extreme range?" For the next hour, Sarah explained her thought process in detail. She covered everything from the ballistics calculations to the wind reading techniques she had learned from years of experience. The senior sniper instructor took extensive notes, clearly fascinated by her methods. "One thing I don't understand," the instructor said, "is how you were able to account for all the variables at that range. Our ballistics tables only go up to 2,500 meters." Sarah smiled slightly. "Sir, I had to extrapolate beyond the published data. I used my knowledge of the bullet's ballistic coefficient and drag characteristics to calculate the trajectory manually. I also relied heavily on my spotter's wind readings and my own observations of atmospheric conditions." The questions continued for another hour, covering every aspect of the shot from preparation to execution. Sarah answered honestly, explaining both her methods and her reasoning for firing against orders. Finally, Colonel Martinez sat back in his chair. "Sergeant Chen, what you accomplished today was extraordinary. The shot you made will be studied by military marksmen for decades to come. However, the fact remains that you disobeyed a direct order." Sarah's heart sank. Despite the success of the mission, she was still going to face disciplinary action. "That said," the colonel continued, "your assessment of the tactical situation was correct, and your action likely prevented civilian casualties. After consulting with my superiors, I've decided that no formal disciplinary action will be taken. Sarah felt a surge of relief. She had escaped punishment for her decision. But more importantly, she had proven that sometimes taking calculated risks was necessary to protect innocent lives. There is, however, one consequence of your action, Colonel Martinez said with a slight smile. The Army's marksmanship unit has specifically requested that you be assigned to their advanced ballistics research program. They want you to help develop new techniques for extreme long-range shooting. This was news Sarah hadn't expected. The Army marksmanship unit was the elite of the elite, responsible for training the military's best shooters and developing new sniper tactics. Sir, I'm honored by the offer, Sarah said, but I'd like to finish my deployment with my current unit first. Understood, the colonel replied. The assignment will begin when you return to the United States. As the debriefing ended, Sarah reflected on the events of the day. She had started the morning as a skilled sniper with a good reputation. She was ending it as the holder of the world record for the longest confirmed sniper shot in history. But the record wasn't what mattered most to her. What mattered was that she had trusted her training and instincts when others said success was impossible. She had taken a calculated risk that had saved lives and neutralized a genuine threat. Rodriguez was waiting outside the conference room when she emerged. How did it go, Sarge? Better than I expected, Sarah replied. No disciplinary action. And apparently I'm going to be working with the Army marksmanship unit when we get back home. That's fantastic. You deserve it after what you did today. As they walked back to their quarters, Sarah thought about her father's words about taking shots that others said couldn't be made. He had been talking about hunting deer in the Colorado mountains, but the principle was the same. Sometimes, success required pushing beyond accepted limits and trusting your abilities even when others doubted them. Word of the record-breaking shot spread quickly through the military community. Within days, Sarah was fielding calls from ballistics experts, military historians, and journalists wanting to know the details of her achievement. She answered their questions professionally but always emphasized that the shot was about mission success, not personal glory. The remaining weeks of her deployment passed quietly. The intelligence gathered from the neutralized target led to several successful operations against Taliban forces in the region. The village below the shooting position remained safe from attack. When Sarah finally returned to the United States, she was greeted as a hero. The Army marksmanship unit had prepared an extensive research program designed to understand how she had accomplished what ballistics experts had said was impossible. They wanted to incorporate her techniques into the training of future snipers. But for Sarah, the most important result of that day in the mountains was the knowledge that she had made a difference. She had protected innocent lives by taking a shot that no one else believed could be made. In a career full of successful missions, that would always be the one that mattered most. Years later, when young snipers asked her about the secret to making impossible shots, Sarah would tell them about the importance of preparation, practice, and understanding your equipment. But she would always end with the lesson her father had taught her in the Colorado mountains. Sometimes, you have to trust your instincts and take the shot that others say can't be made.